You need to take responsibility for this case and resign." I was unable to accept Margaret's unpleasant face when she said that, so I firmly said, "We still haven't determined the main problem. It's too drastic to fire me." "The reason? Clearly, you made a mistake. It's only a question of time since you're already getting close to retirement." I silently snapped at her, knowing full well that she had no intention of investigating. Her tone was sarcastic. She was unaware that firing me would be the end of her career, possibly even her life. "Excuse me, Mr. President, I need to talk." I walked into the president's office without warning, and he was astonished. "Jameson, what is it? Why is that face so scary?" The president knew what was going on right now, but he never thought he would hear me say I was leaving. I gave him my resignation letter and gave him an explanation of our earlier talk. "Please, just calm down. What about your patents, though? Without them, the company will fail." "My patents. But because I've been let go, goodbye." I never would have thought that I would have a card that would completely reverse the situation so soon. I'm a 58-year-old systems engineer named Jameson. I have worked for this company for 30 years, mostly developing core systems for government and business organizations, IES. To stay current, we now concentrate on creating online store apps for businesses. Programmers and engineers now work in a more varied range of fields than in the past, and every generation brings with it a wealth of new knowledge. Nevertheless, in retrospect, it was worthwhile to go through the process of collaborating as a team to satisfy customers' expectations and expand the business. We get a lot of requests from businesses for app development because people these days prefer to shop online rather than in physical locations. Because of this, there is a severe engineer shortage in the business, and I was having everyday difficulties managing several projects. We also made an effort to train young workers, but the present generation of workers was unable to handle the demanding workload and frequently left before they had a chance to develop further due to regular late-night overtime and even remaining overnight during peak times. Numerous requests were made for the business to greatly enhance the working atmosphere. Even I, a dedicated employee who never got married, had begged for improved working circumstances, but eventually put up with the when in Rome attitude for decades. I've always thought that eventually someone would take action. I overheard an amusing talk among the HR workers one day while taking a break and smoking a cigarette. It appeared that a woman in her 40s would take over as HR director. Thoughtless HR head before, but what about this time around? I thought they would employ some bright engineers, put more money into sales and development, and assign it to my department. However, based on the talk I'd overheard, I was forced to abandon that dream. I was still busy and had forgotten about the unpleasant rumors a month after I first heard them. I was astonished to see that the budget for this month had been reduced by more than 30% one day when I was going over it. We were going to have to work unpaid overtime to achieve the project deadlines because of the drastically reduced labor budget. I limited the information since I knew how serious the situation was, and I went to HR to talk about the budget. I thought about the new HR head I had heard about in the smoking area while I was in the elevator. I felt depressed at the idea of meeting them. It was boisterous at HR when I got there. There was a woman who appeared to be the head of HR disputing with someone from another department. The man from the other division stormed by me as I got closer, obviously upset. I inferred from the discourse and tone that they had likewise made considerable cuts to their budget. "Excuse me, I'm Jameson from development, and I need to talk to the HR head." To keep things amicable, I made an effort to be as courteous as I could. "Had you scheduled a meeting?" She said it in a dismissive tone. "I'm busy." I was not one to give up lightly. "I apologize for abruptly troubling you. Jameson here from the development department. I have some inquiries concerning the budget for this month." The head of HR, Margaret, sat at her desk and widened her eyes for a time before speaking. "You're Jameson, I see. I apologize for the inconvenience, but I can't adjust the budget. I've recently started this job, so please don't add extra work that I don't need to perform. Her way of speaking to someone much older than herself, even if she held the higher position, was inappropriate. In addition, I've always felt that the funding for the development department is excessive. I've made multiple recommendations to my father, the president. Margaret's reckless demeanor astounded me. She obviously didn't comprehend the difficulties facing the development department, despite the fact that we worked for the same firm. Still, while drafting the budget, there ought to be some discussion with every department. We won't have enough money for overtime compensation under this budget. The caliber of our apps and systems will deteriorate as a result of our need to put in more unpaid time. Even though I knew it would probably not matter, I felt compelled to speak up. Then manage your employees to finish their work on time without overtime. Are you even qualified to make such statement? The head of our department and I don't get along. I manage a lot of projects, have a professional background, and am essentially in charge of the development department. Although I think I'm in a good situation, it's hard to make timely exits right now. Even though I knew nothing I said would change the situation, I couldn't help but speak when someone who wasn't aware of it did. You certainly seem impressive for someone without a title. You understand that you had a limited budget, so use your brain to finish the work. Then, please talk with Mike, our manager, about this more. I said, "Excuse me," not seeing a way out. I made the decision to back off. I have lived for more than 50 years, and I have never met someone so uncivilized and oppressive. I went to the smoking section to smoke a cigarette to help me relax. Though I told myself it would be a waste for someone like Margaret, I still felt like smoking 5 more. It's time to return. I went back to the development department and spoke with Mike, the manager, right away. He treated me as though I were an issue. "Jameson, did you go directly to the head of HR without telling me?" "Yes, you were away, so I took it upon myself to talk to her." Mike grumbled, obviously irritated by what I had done. He has never liked confrontation and has always tried to stay out of trouble. It's advisable to obey that HR chief. She became involved through contacts, became the president's daughter, and quickly advanced to her current position. She told me that just now, although I wasn't shocked. I had heard this story in the smoking section before. I couldn't figure out why they would put her in HR when she was trying to advance her career. Unpaid overtime is assured with this budget, but I don't want to be at odds with my superiors either. How will we proceed? Our developers would either crumble or scatter in droves as a result of this. We currently lack sufficient staff, so it would be disastrous to lose any more. We have no choice but to do unpaid overtime, but don't let the quality of the apps drop. Although I wasn't surprised, I was somewhat upset to learn that Mike and Margaret had the same opinion. This wouldn't sit well with the other engineers. After all, who works for money? Even though I got a bad feeling, I had to give up. From that point on, our staff worked on several projects and put in late hours every night to complete unpaid overtime. The money that was meant for system and app development instead went toward our benefits, overtime pay, and monthly paycheck. Margaret's tyrannical leadership destroyed our motivation and endangered our way of life. I can no longer stand to work like a dog, Jameson. I am at my breaking point. The younger staff members let out a stream of grievances and disappointments, saying, "I'm about to collapse." Although it's my responsibility to correct them, I feel as like I'm at the end of my rope and can't help them enough. And I've reached my limit. For what purpose are we even working? Margaret has absurd ideas for her finances. It makes sense why they would think so. The sales department has experienced significant budget cuts as well, but it is now unmanageable due to the increase in client projects and new company ventures. Both of us are about to go under. With Margaret's head, we've sunk to a new low even though we were already a dark company. I have no idea how to put that into words. I say, "Oh, Margaret, good work," as I walk by her in the corridor. Instead of replying to my greeting, she clicks her tongue. It appears that I am the only target of this attitude, maybe as a result of our earlier run-in. My colleagues and my subordinates' discontent increased every day, and by the time Margaret had been head for 6 months, resignations were commonplace. "Thank you so much for everything, Jameson. I'm leaving and returning to my hometown." "It's too much for me anymore," he replies, sounding almost dead. "Indeed, you've accomplished far enough. I'm grateful. I apologize for requiring you to work for such a corporation. First, rest well. Then, after you're feeling better, tend to your parents. Your life is only getting started, and you are young." Another important team member departed. Not only is the development department losing staff members, but other departments are also experiencing a wave of resignations. How much longer will things stay this way? Is it worth it to be employed at a company that has become an unending source of misery? Still, I won't be retiring for another few years. I'll persevere. I gave myself a pat on the back and returned to my computer. The development department was thrown into disarray one evening when a client reported a system issue. "Jameson, we are going to immediately apologize to the client." Manager Mike quickly reminded me to get ready. Disappointed, I closed my laptop and pulled my tie back. When we went to apologize to the client, we were reprimanded for more than 2 hours rather than having a civil conversation. I was shocked as well. I had worked in this field for more than 30 years, and I had never received such a harsh punishment for a mistake. Future business transactions were reevaluated due to the malfunction's excessively large losses. However, it made sense. The development department was already overflowing with engineer resignations and collapses. It was not shocking that errors and glitches began to appear. "Jameson, you really messed up." After the client raged at me on the train ride back, Manager Mike threw the blame at me, his subordinate. I apologized profusely. It escaped my notice during delivery. We got back to the office and I was called into HR right away. I thought the head would punish me in some way. I was probably really exhausted when I entered the elevator. I was annoyed with the entire corporation instead of feeling afraid. "You called for me?" I asked, turning to face Margaret. "Jameson, stop acting as though you don't know. You made a grave error." Considering that she forced the resignation of important engineers and fostered an atmosphere where unpaid overtime was required, she had no right to make that claim. Even though the problem involved a client I was in charge of, instances like these are not unusual given the budget and manpower constraints. I shot back at Margaret, coolly and rationally. She is my superior, yet I couldn't allow her get away with it. "With that attitude, are you saying it's because of my budget?" she inquired. "I believe it is one of the factors in this case," I said. Margaret's countenance contorted into anger, but I couldn't just take her reprimand in silence. I was beyond caring, but I could sense what she was going to say next. "You need to take responsibility for this and resign," she insisted. I couldn't take Margaret's expression when she said that, so I firmly retorted, "We haven't even determined the reason yet. It's too drastic to fire me." "The reason? Clearly, you made a mistake. It's only a matter of time since you're almost retired anyhow," she remarked sarcastically. I silently lost it when I realized she was not going to investigate the true reason. "Comprehensive. I'll provide my resignation letter to the president and let him know if you persist," I said. I hurried out of HR, returned to my development department workstation, and picked up my letter of resignation. It was something I had planned for a long time, in case I ever needed to give up. The president's office was the only place to go. I remarked as I walked in, "Excuse me, Mr. President. I need to talk." I burst into the president's office, startling him. "Jameson, what is it? Why is that face so scary?" he inquired. The president knew what was going on right now, but he never thought he would hear me say I was leaving. I gave him my resignation letter and gave him an explanation of our earlier talk. "Please, just calm down. What about your patents, though? Without them, the company will fail," he declared. My patents. As I've been fired. Goodbye, I answered. What? It makes sense. I said as I left the president's office. The systems and apps that account for 70% of the company's revenue cannot be operated or altered without me. I made my way directly to the smoking section. I would always come here to get my thoughts straight. The idea that I wouldn't be smoking here anymore made me feel sad. I started making plans to spend my latter years working as a freelance engineer because I had some savings. As I smoked and thought about this, a security guard came up to me. Well done, Jameson. Why is that face so dejected? He inquired. Well, it's really hard to say, but actually, I became rambling. He was about my age, and we used to hang out in the smoking section together. I told him about my firing, as well as the awful office atmosphere and the infamous HR head. That is the narrative. I was half exasperated already, so I tried to make it sound like a joke when I said, I never thought I'd get fired so easily. Jameson, that's just too much. You've experienced a lot. Anyone would find it absurd, he retorted. He mentioned something unexpected just when I was relieved to vent to someone close. I was going to keep this to myself, but there's something about the head of HR that's been bothering me. What about Margaret? I inquired. His expression was pitiful as he started talking. One day, while I was monitoring the security cameras in the guard room, I saw a woman who looked like the head of HR hugging a man in a deserted warehouse. Hugging. I questioned, taken aback. That kind of hug, he said in agreement. It was very amazing to watch on the security camera. Although I had heard gossip that she was attracted to guys, I never thought she would act in such a way while working. The man appears to be married. On his left hand, I noticed a ring-like brilliance. The security officer was somewhat relieved. I decided to reveal this to you, Jameson, as it made me feel uneasy. Still, I was interested in the man. When was this video recorded? I asked. I need to check something. Let me see. Are you planning to go to the security room? Inquired the man. Indeed. I've got nothing to lose because I was dismissed. I begged, please help me, and was let into the security room. Every 3 days or so, they have a covert meeting at the warehouse. I've noted multiple instances and dates, he remarked. I grinned silently as he showed me the most recent footage. Manager Mike was the man who was hugging Margaret, and there was no doubt. Before leaving for home, I thanked the security man and received a copy of the troublesome film. The company can't function without me, but I feel like I've got to pull off one final major prank because I feel like I do. I never imagined that I would devise such a cunning scheme before to becoming 60. Planning my approach while having a cigarette at home, I sat at my workstation. I wanted to open a can of beer, but refrained to maintain my composure. I took a shower, made my plan for the next day, and went to bed. The grand finale takes place tomorrow. My head was filled with images of the company I had worked for so many years. The idea that I would be battling this alone after the firm failed me is pitiful and awful. Luckily, though, I had some fascinating cards to deal with now. I made the decision to embrace this battle and gave myself mental encouragement until I fell asleep. The weather was ideal the following morning, making it an appropriate morning for the battle. Knowing that this might be my last day at the company, I prepared myself resolutely and went there. I walked lightly. I arrived feeling calm despite my circumstances, only to discover the office in disarray. Anticipatedly, the customer was promptly contacted to arrange an urgent meeting to discuss the problems resulting from the system failure. The president gave the order, and the conference room with the screen served as the venue. The meeting is in the evening. Mike, the manager, answered. With a little anxiety, he answered, Yeah, it seems so. I questioned his level of comprehension regarding the gravity of the circumstance. I looked into the problem more over my lunch break and discovered that it had become a really concerning scenario overnight. I was tempted to tell him in private. My hand only grew stronger over time. It's likely that very few engineers in the development department realized how serious this issue was. I calmed down before the conflict by drinking black coffee and puffing on a cigarette in the designated smoking area. This is doable, I told myself. It was almost time. The president, executives, and managers from several departments were present when the meeting got underway. Even though I was let go yesterday, I took part in the activity as the director in charge. The substantial budget cuts that had been a source of worry over the previous 6 months contributed significantly to the malfunction, as they frequently resulted in the resignation of experienced engineers, which in turn led to poor system management. All I did was tell Margaret again what I had said earlier. Margaret, why was the budget cut so drastically? Margaret stumbled through a nonsensical response to reduce overtime and promote work efficiency. It was quite challenging to design and modify the absence systems with the limited funding. Without money for labor, working overtime without pay became the norm. Margaret was still silent, I noted as I urged her further. It really was amazing how hard she attempted to stand her ground against me. Overtime rose rather than decreased. Our restricted resources, fewer staff and less money, made our work even less productive. The executives knew that Margaret was a conceited person, and most of them nodded. I take it that's because Jameson lacks competence. It is merely scapegoating to blame the budget, she continued. Why is she not addressing Manager Mike's responsibility? Others began to question this, so I got up and moved in the direction of the projector. What are you doing, Jameson? Go back to your seat. Margaret gave the order. The buzz in the meeting room started. It makes sense, given that in this tight environment I started fumbling with the projector out of the blue. Please, everyone, look at this. I made the decision to be thorough. What's this all about? Hold on. Wait. Margaret and Mike were shown on air having a private conversation. Although there was no audio, this kind of behavior at work was totally improper, especially in a solitary place. It was sufficient to be regarded as a serious infraction of professional conduct. Margaret, Mike, what is this? Mike and Margaret were devoid of expression and pallid. Johnson, you're married, aren't you? I wanted to emphasize that holding back had more to do with it than simply being married. No, it's not what appears to be. There is a miscommunication here, Margaret stumbled. It would be intriguing to observe how they provided an explanation for this. What do you mean by misunderstanding? I turned on the projector and moved on to the following video. This tape, which was taken on a later occasion, revealed Margaret and Mike having even closer contact. I'm not this person. It's not. Margaret appeared to be about to burst into tears, almost as she was breathing heavily. Enough, Jameson. Now switch it off. Mike made a demand. What are you talking about, Manager Mike? I changed to a different video on the projector. It showed Mike working on my computer in the development department by himself late at night. I was astonished to see this from the security guard. Even though I hadn't given him my password, it was easy to figure out how he was able to enter in at such a late hour. Manager Mike, who usually pushed work onto his subordinates, what were you doing alone in the office that night? All Mike could do was stay silent. Did he truly believe he would escape detection? Mike, I'd like to hear more from you later. Is that okay? I inquired. I was the one that broke the system for the client that day. In the conference room, most individuals were in disbelief. Margaret murmured, I thought if I kept slashing the budget, people would quit and Jameson would be exhausted and break down, after a minute of awkward quiet. However, I recommended it since he was too strong. Thus, Margaret was the one who suggested to Mike that there was a system error. I couldn't tolerate it that you were more capable than me and that your colleagues trusted you. Surprisingly, I was briefly tempted when Manager Mike openly admitted his feelings. I couldn't help but worry that you'd surpass me and become more influential in the company. Manager Mike couldn't look me in the eye, so he focused his attention on my tie. So when I gained power, I decided to get rid of you for Mike's sake. Margaret, in contrast to Mike, gave me a straight glance that was twisted into a look of loathing and rage. Their looks were disgusting and horrifying at the same time. In a nutshell, you two desired that I leave the company. After all these years of making contributions to the organization, why did I have to be let go? Even though I was furious as hell, I was done. Now, about the system malfunction you two orchestrated, I went on. I looked into it earlier, and it appears the damages to the client company amount to millions of dollars. What? Not at all. Millions? Margaret paled, realizing that by telling her beloved what to do, she had ruined everything. When it finally hit him, it was too late. What? Millions? Is that accurate? Mike inquired. Yes, these are preliminary figures, but I'm astounded by their collective stupidity. I responded. Manager Mike carried it out, but Manager Margaret, who gave the orders, is equally guilty. May I ask how you plan to handle this? Margaret said, I'm at a loss for what to do. You need to fix it. Well, since I was fired by you yesterday, there's nothing I can do about it, I replied. Margaret's cheeks reddened with rage, but she was unable to respond right away. You think you can handle this, Mike? You carried out the task. Ultimately, Margaret went on, assigning her beloved the responsibility. Mike was clearly disturbed by what had been spoken at this moment. What topic are you discussing? The commands came from you. Besides, without Jameson's approval, we are unable to make systemic changes. What? Margaret asked in shock. I was unaware of the patents. I had designed and patented the malfunctioning client system 30 years prior. Therefore, it cannot be fixed without me. You get it now, Margaret? I stated. The executives and the president were in disbelief and seemed to disappear inside the conference room. Our client has lost millions of dollars. This is terrible. While the president was aware of the patents, it's unlikely that he anticipated such a disastrous outcome. I'll use my power to revoke your termination. Just swiftly fix the system. Sorry, but I've already handed in my resignation to the president, so it's too late. Margaret's mouth fell open in silence. At this time, her haughty manner was almost impressive, even while she was appealing. Wait, Jameson. All I did was accept the resignation. He turned to face his daughter and urged her to kneel, saying, Please forgive this foolish daughter. Why should I have to kneel to this guy? You knave. Do you not recognize how serious this situation is? Express your genuine regrets. Still, I wasn't into kneeling or a forced apology. I apologize sincerely. Kindly think it over again. Margaret seemed to have never apologized from the bottom of her heart, based on her phony apology. Could you maybe think it over and aid the company, Jameson? If you remedy this, we'll void the dismissal and extend an executive post offer to you. I had been taken advantage of for decades, so such kind remarks had no effect on me. I'm leaving the company already, even if you decide to overturn the dismissal. An employee who has made the decision to leave cannot be persuaded otherwise. Both of their features went dark at that very moment. Hold on. You won't assist us after all this apologizing. It all began as a result of you. Isn't it wonderful that you can now reduce the budget even further without me? Margaret couldn't say anything. She did not reply. Besides, your dear manager Mike will figure it out even without me. Maybe you could generously boost the development department's funding after he repairs the system, which would satisfy everyone. Stop joking around. Perhaps they were so enraged by me that all they could do was vomit out crude comments. Perhaps this should come to an end. Margaret, you are the one who has been playing around all along. Oh, and you may want to refrain from acting strangely at work going forward. Farewell. I quit the company where I had worked for more than 30 years after making that final statement. Margaret's angry yells could be heard behind me as I left the conference room, but I fortified myself and turned away. If I did, I thought her face would have a very scary expression on it. The very thought of it unnerved me. 3 months had gone by since I left the company, and time had flown by. I'd eventually used a resignation service to effectively depart after receiving countless calls and letters attempting to bring me back. I discovered via the news that the incident had resulted in the total termination of our company's relationship with the client, so giving rise to substantial demands for compensation. It's obvious that they've given up trying to improve the system. I wonder if they have the funds to develop a successor system, but it will be interesting to watch how it is constructed. I kept in touch with the security guy, and when I left, we would occasionally get together at an inexpensive beer hall to discuss rumors about the company. It turns out that there was a romantic relationship between Margaret and Mike. Margaret, it seems, slashed the budget to drive me, the ace, to the breaking point since her darling Mike thought I was a bother. Looking back, it seemed very strange that despite everything, Manager Mike's pay hadn't improved all that much. Everything made obvious now. Margaret's father, the president, would likely pay the compensation, but it appears that Mike's wife learned of their relationship, which has caused further financial and emotional hardship for them both. Although the security guard was unable to determine how it was found specifically, it was sufficient information to regale others over a few beers. The company is going to fail in a few years because my patents powered my other apps and technologies that are no longer useful for business. Nevertheless, neither Margaret nor the president posed the greatest threat to the organization. Without a doubt, that was the security guard. I didn't hunt for a new career after leaving the company and went back to my hometown. As I'd approached 60, I made the decision to inherit my parents' home and live out the rest of my days in the country. I hadn't been able to see them while they were still living, but it's great to have a hometown you can go back to. As an engineer, I've worked with computers and other technologies in buildings for years, but I'm not sure what I should do next. My ability to work as a freelance engineer is enhanced by the patents and abilities I have acquired. There won't be a problem with money for a long, because I have enough saved to live well for almost 10 years without working. I'm free right now. I have few happy memories from the decades I have spent concentrating only on my profession. There may have been a few, but they didn't make a significant impact. I've always desired to pursue an endeavor outside of engineering. Perhaps I'll take a part-time job at a convenience shop or restaurant. It could be fun to open my own tavern or beer hall. If I do, I'm going to make the kind security guy my first client. I've relieved myself of the weighty responsibilities. I'll live the remainder of my life with greater freedom, as though I'm making up for lost time.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hope to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.